everyone, this is Brittany here with your art fill. Today I am continuing my character alphabet series with the letter L. I chose to create fan art of Link this time, specifically from the Ocarina of Time. But before we get too far in this video, please hit that thumbs up if you are also a fan of Link. I wanted to use watercolor like I did previously with Jeff that I did for Jay. So I used my mixed media sketchbook and I chose to draw Link riding Epona because most of my nostalgia with Ocarina of Time was riding around Hyrule on Epona. I was too young at the time to really understand how to play the game past getting out of Kokiri Forest and getting through the Great Deku Tree. So really I had a lot of experience fighting that spider boss to be able to get out into Hyrule. And I also enjoyed trying to get past the guards in the castle when you first try to talk to Zelda. I have since passed the game years later when I was finally old enough to understand the controls and how to figure things out. But back when I was younger, my brother actually had a save for me so that I could play as adult Link and ride around on Epona because that's all 8-year-old me wanted to do, and I spent a lot of my time in Lon Lon Ranch and terrorizing the chickens there and hanging out with the cows and getting them to produce bottles of milk. And if you've seen the previous videos that I've done of my fan art, the letter K was a little bit of a struggle. I drew Kiki from Kiki's Delivery Service, and I went through a whole bunch of different methods to try and get her to look the way I wanted her to. I ultimately ended up on digital because I was just too flustered with doing physical mediums. But this time around I stuck with watercolor and also went for more of a draw this in your style approach. And I am much happier with the final result because of approaching it this way this time. I didn't bother with getting into the intricate details and trying to make it a style that I was unfamiliar with. I also focused more on Link himself instead of the background elements, and I think for Kiki, I definitely focused a lot on the background as well as trying to get Kiki correctly, so there was just a lot involved in how I wanted to create the previous art, but this time I focused in on creating Link himself. And then the background elements became more painterly and less defined, but still evident that it was Hyrule that Link was riding Epona through. And I did have to be conscious of that 3-layer watercolor rule where you can't really layer watercolor on top of the page more than 3 times before it starts getting like muddy and not the colors you want it to be. So I ended up using some watercolor pencils blended in to give another layer and a more defined color layer. I also decided to add some gold shimmer to some of Link's armor with some metallic acrylic craft paint just to give it a little bit of shimmer in certain areas on like the buckles and different saddle pieces, which you end up not seeing unless you're like turning the page or shifting the notebook. So it doesn't stick out as much as I wanted it to, but it was still a fun little addition that you can get to see on the physical end product. Also, to define Link more from the background, I end up using my Pigma Micron pens and outlining specific aspects to make sure he stands out from the Hyrule painterly background. Overall, I am happy with my final fan art for the letter L, and I look forward to trying out the next character. If you have any suggestions for the letter M, please leave those in the comments. I don't really have an idea for what character I will do, and please remember to give this video a like and also subscribe if you want to see the next fan art that I do. and thank you so much for watching.